What if being truly good makes you a useless, not just overlooked, not just irrelevant, but actually destructive to yourself and maybe even to others? It sounds absurd, but that's exactly the unsettling question at the heart of Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel, The Idiot. A book that dares to ask, what happens when someone deeply innocent and morally pure enters a world built on deception, ego, and ambition? This wasn't some abstract philosophical exercise for Dostoevsky. It came from his lived experience, his brushes with death, his battles with illness, poverty, and faith. He channeled all of that suffering into The Idiot, crafting it as a response to a world that often punishes virtue instead of rewarding it. At its core, the novel confronts a painful paradox. Heightened moral awareness, being too conscious, too sensitive to the suffering of others, can break a person. It can paralyze you. And in a world driven by power, greed, and self-interest, true goodness isn't just difficult. It might actually be impossible to maintain without falling apart. But Dostoevsky goes even deeper. He doesn't just expose the cruelty of society, he digs into the reasons behind it, into the psychological and spiritual choices people make. What causes this moral collapse? Why do people act against what they know to be right? What's broken inside us? Dostoevsky wasn't writing from a place of clarity or peace. While working on The Idiot, he was grappling with severe epilepsy, crushing debt from his gambling addiction, and the deaths of loved ones. He once admitted to his niece that the concept behind the book was so complex, he feared it would turn out to be a failure. He even said that the entire novel existed primarily to lead to its tragic conclusion. And that ending, where Prince Myshkin, the so-called beautiful soul, is left in a state of mental ruin and Nastasya is dead, is no accident. It's a brutal indictment of a world that can't handle purity, a society that destroys what it doesn't understand. In the end, The Idiot isn't just a novel about a kind man in a cruel world. It's a psychological and philosophical cry, a challenge to us all. Can goodness survive in a corrupt world? And if it can't, what does that say about us? Anyways, let's first go through synopsis of The Idiot to really understand what Dostoevsky was trying to convey. The Idiot opens in 1869 Russia with a train ride. Prince Myshkin, the protagonist, is returning from years in a Swiss sanatorium. He has epilepsy, just like Dostoevsky himself, and he's broke. No money, no experience, no armor against the world. What he does have is compassion, innocence, and an almost childlike sincerity. On the train, he meets two men who represent everything he's not. First, there's Parfeon Rogozhin, recently rich, emotionally unstable, and completely obsessed with a woman named Nastasya Filipovna. Then there's Lebedev, who's slippery, manipulative, and always playing angles. From the very first scene, it's clear, Myshkin is a lamb, dropped into a den of wolves. When he arrives in St. Petersburg, Myshkin visits General Yapanchin, a distant relative. There, he meets the general's youngest daughter, Aglaya. Smart, sharp, and intrigued by this strange, sincere man who seems completely out of sync with society. But the real gravitational force of the story is Nastasya Filipovna. She's beautiful, charismatic, and damaged. As a young girl, she was groomed and exploited by a wealthy predator, Trotsky, and now carries a mix of rage, pride, and shame. She's been thrown into a grotesque marriage plot with Ganya, a social climber who sees her as a ticket to status. She sees right through him. Then comes the infamous party scene. Rogozhin crashes it with a wild offer, 100,000 rubles for Nastasya, as if he's buying a prize. The room freezes. Nastasya doesn't miss a beat. She takes the money and flings it at Ganya, exposing his greed. Myshkin, who's been watching quietly, does something even more shocking. He offers to marry her, not out of lust or pity, but out of pure, unconditional love. No judgment, just grace. and it terrifies her. She runs off with Rogozhin, and this is where we start to see the cost of goodness. Myshkin inherits some money, and suddenly, everyone wants a piece of him. But he doesn't push back. He helps them. People lie to him, slap him, betray him, and he forgives them all, not because he's weak, but because he genuinely believes in compassion. Over time, Myshkin and Aglaya grow closer. She's drawn to his purity, but also resents it. She wants to understand him, but she can't. She cannot understand him. Why does he keep showing mercy to people who use him? Why can't he choose dignity over forgiveness? He's caught in a love triangle. Aglaya, who represents idealistic youth, and Nastasya, the wounded woman who sees herself as beyond saving. Eventually, it all collides. There's a scene where all three, Myshkin, Aglaya, and Nastasya, confront each other. Aglaya realizes that Myshkin will always choose Nastasya and walks away heartbroken. Myshkin and Nastasya plan to marry. But on the wedding day, Nastasya runs. Again. She can't accept Myshkin's love. She believes she doesn't deserve it. Rogozhin takes her away, and in a final spiral of jealousy and despair, he kills her. When Myshkin finds them, he doesn't react with anger. He sits beside Rogozhin, comforts him, wipes his tears. The man who murdered the woman he loved and tried to kill him once before is met with forgiveness. By the end, Myshkin is shattered. He collapses mentally and emotionally, reverting to a childlike stupor. The world he tried to heal has broken him instead. He's sent back to the asylum, while the others are left to sift through the wreckage. And that's the story Dostoevsky gives us. It's an unsettling answer to a deeply uncomfortable question. What happens when someone genuinely good enters a world that doesn't know what to do with goodness? Prince Myshkin, a man of radical compassion and Christ-like sincerity, isn't defeated by a flaw in his character. He's crushed by the cruelty of a society that sees virtue as a threat. Myshkin arrives in the story like a beam of innocence, forgiving everyone, relatives trying to scam him, a rival who nearly murders him, even the man who kills the woman he desperately tried to save. He holds no grudges. He speaks plainly. He wants what's best for others, even at his own expense. But in a world ruled by ego, pride, and manipulation, this kind of purity doesn't inspire admiration. It provokes discomfort. Rather than calling him a saint, people call him an idiot. Because if someone can actually live with selfless love, what does that say about the rest of us? Psychologist Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance helps explain this reaction. When people witness someone acting with radical goodness, it clashes with their self-image. The tension is so uncomfortable that it's easier to dismiss the good person as naive or mentally deficient than to reconsider your own values. Myshkin's goodness becomes an indictment, and most people can't handle the mirror he holds up. Rather than reflect, they recoil. Dostoevsky knew what he was doing. Myshkin is modeled on the Russian Orthodox tradition of the Eurodivy, or holy fool. These are figures who seem mad on the outside but are spiritually clear-sighted. Their strange behavior is meant to expose the moral decay around them. Myshkin isn't naive. He sees the darkness in people but chooses not to mirror it. He refuses to play their games, to retaliate, to manipulate. His goodness is active, not passive, and that makes it even more disruptive. His presence disturbs people in ways they can't articulate. Take Aglaya, for instance. She's drawn to Myshkin, even gets engaged to him, but ultimately mocks him, not because he's stupid, but because he refuses to assert himself, to act like a man in the traditional sense. He won't play the roles society expects. To her, this looks like weakness, but to Dostoevsky, it's strength of another kind. Rogozhin, Myshkin's opposite, is driven by obsession and possessiveness. He wants Nastasya Filipovna not to save her, but to own her. Myshkin wants to rescue her. This contrast between love as salvation and love as domination is at the heart of the novel's tragedy. And it's this very purity in Myshkin that drives Rogozhin to madness and ultimately to murder. In the end, Myshkin doesn't hate him. He comforts him. He mourns instead of retaliates. But this mercy doesn't redeem the world. It leaves Myshkin shattered. By the final pages, Myshkin has returned to the asylum, mentally broken. His goodness hasn't transformed the people around him. It's been swallowed by their dysfunction. And that's Dostoevsky's bleak truth. In a corrupt world, goodness isn't just unprotected, it's actively endangered. The saint doesn't bring salvation, he becomes the sacrifice. This collapse of virtue echoes the philosophical dilemmas explored by Camus and even Paul the Apostle. In an unjust world, the truly good don't look wise, they look insane. Myshkin himself quotes Shakespeare, "The world's a stage." But the irony is that while everyone else is performing roles, cynic, lover, manipulator, Myshkin is the only one not acting. He's real. And that makes him intolerable. Modern thinkers like Nietzsche and Machiavelli would argue that Myshkin's kind of goodness is dangerous because it lacks limits. Nietzsche especially saw Christian morality, when taken to its extreme, as something that can weaken the individual. A person needs instincts, boundaries, the capacity to say no. Myshkin never learns that. His virtue has no guardrails, and that's what makes his fall feel inevitable. Dostoevsky doesn't give us an easy moral. He doesn't tell us to reject goodness, but he doesn't pretend it's safe either. In The Idiot, goodness is too raw, too exposed for a world built on self-defense and survival. Society doesn't know how to respond to a man like Myshkin, so it tears him down. And maybe that's the true tragedy. Myshkin isn't the failure. Society is. His collapse doesn't prove that goodness is wrong. It proves that we are unworthy of it. In a world that mocks sincerity, punishes kindness, and celebrates pride, pure virtue becomes not just vulnerable, but doomed. Myshkin's story is Dostoevsky's warning. If we cannot recognize goodness without trying to destroy it, then perhaps we are the real idiots.